Hi, Bennies and Johnnies. Welcome back to the Stop It Buzzed podcast. What's the Buzz? My name is Zoe. I'm a student coordinator here.
Hi, I'm Grace, and I'm the media campaign developer.
And today we are so happy to have Manny, biology professor here at CSB+SJU, here on the podcast to talk about how alcohol can affect the body. And yeah, so Manny, would you like to introduce yourself and a little bit about what you do?
Sure. Again, my name is Manny Campos. I teach in the biology department. I teach mostly pre-health students and nursing students, anatomy and physiology. And as an advisor, I also work quite a bit with pre-health students. I've been here for a while, since 1997. It's a pleasure to be here with you all today.
Awesome. All right.
So I'll do the first question. So what are the long-term effects of heavy drinking physically, for the physical wise?
In terms of heavy consumption, the biggest problems are probably going to be related to brain and cognitive function, and then also liver problems. There's pretty good evidence that long-term abuse of alcohol will result in structural changes in the brain. And these are mostly in areas of the brain responsible for memory and for cognitive function. So those are the areas that begin to show problems: cognition, ability to learn. There's also some issues with motor control if the abuse is prolonged. So that's one of the aspects of the abuse. As far as liver function is concerned, as you know, the liver is involved in detoxing, right? So it's involved in processing alcohol. So if it's doing this continuously, it begins to, for the lack of a better term, work overtime. And there's accumulation of chemicals that are toxic. And as a result of that, the liver begins to accumulate lipids, fats, and that down the road interferes with functioning and can lead to problems like liver failure. There's also, problems potentially with pancreas function. You often hear about alcohol abuse being associated with pancreatic swelling, pancreatitis, which can have, some drastic effects too. There's some links between alcohol abuse and weakened heart functioning. Certainly some links between cancers and alcohol abuse, mostly cancers of the digestive tract. And, alcohol abuse down the road puts the body in a continuous situation of stress. So the fact that a lot of stress hormones get elevated also cause potentially weakened immune system functioning.
Yeah, that is so interesting. All right. So, a term that's been floating around recently in, I guess, the college space is called hangxiety. So, basically, that term just means feeling super anxious, maybe overthinking what you did the night before after a night of heavy drinking. So, why does binge use of alcohol tend to increase feelings of anxiety the next day?
That's actually a great term, and you'll see why. One of the things that happens with drinking, and it could not necessarily be heavy drinking, but certainly would be the case, is that the alcohol will basically cause an increase in a specific neurotransmitter in your brain that has a calming effect. So that is one of the reasons why people, as they begin to drink, they feel more relaxed. The other thing that happens when you start drinking is that the alcohol causes decrease in a specific neurotransmitter that causes anxiety. So this is why people tend to feel somewhat uninhibited, right, when they start drinking. Now, if there's a big binge, right, this keeps happening throughout the binge, and then the next day or whenever shortly thereafter, the brain basically reacts to these changes by kind of backlashing. So what it kind of does is it basically reduces the levels of the neurotransmitter that causes calming, and it increases the levels of the neurotransmitter that causes anxiety, right? So the opposite happens then. You basically are not relaxed, you're anxious. On top of that, like I said before, stress hormone levels go up following this binge, right? And the biggest stress hormone is cortisol. So basically, the increased levels of cortisol put the body in a kind of an anxious, sympathetic type response. And this exacerbates that anxiety, causes higher heart rates and so forth.
Interesting. Yes. Yeah. That's so cool to hear about.
Yeah, that makes sense. So the term like blacking out,
Yep.
what is happening in the body when, you're unconscious or blacking out, I guess?
In order to basically remember something, you've got to form what is called a memory trace. And a memory trace is simply the ability to store that memory by increasing the electrical activity of neurons in a specific area of the brain. And you need a number of neurotransmitters to do that. So the only way you're going to remember something, especially even in short term, is to form that trace. While you're intoxicated, especially heavily intoxicated, those neurotransmitters that help establish that memory trace are dysfunctional. So you can't form that memory trace. So as far as you're concerned, right, you don't remember what happened. So there's no trace. You don't remember. That's a blackout. There's nothing there.
Yeah.
The other thing that happens too is that this memory trace will only be accessible in the short term, like a few days. If you want to remember that long term, you've got to consolidate the trace and move it from short-term memory to long-term memory.
Okay.
Alcohol can also interfere with that. So not only it will interfere with the formation of a short-term memory trace, but it also interferes with the consolidation that occurs.
Cool. All right. So when somebody blacks out, there's often vomiting involved. So what causes someone to vomit from too much alcohol consumption, and how can this, if it's happening too often, be detrimental to the body?
So the liver is the organ that basically processes alcohol. And it can do so very well. So what it does, it basically takes alcohol and it converts it into a compound called acetaldehyde, which is very toxic. So acetaldehyde can't accumulate without being very toxic. So the liver not only produces acetaldehyde, but then also processes it into kind of an inert, chemical that then is excreted. However, if you're using alcohol, high doses and continuously, as the liver tries to basically break it down, the levels of acetaldehyde begin to increase faster than the liver can get rid of it. The body detects this as a problem, right? It's a toxin. So the body then stimulates a center in the brain that's known as the vomiting center. And what the vomiting center does, it begins to alter the activity of the small intestine and the stomach, causing this thing called reverse peristalsis, in which basically these contractile waves begin to move contents of the small intestine and the stomach upwards towards the esophagus. And then in addition to that, it relaxes the stomach, it relaxes the esophagus completely, opens all these sphincters, and then there's a massive reflex contraction of all abdominal muscles while the person is breathing forcefully. So this basically, it's like a bag that's sitting there that you squeeze, right?
Yeah.
And everything comes up.
Interesting.
Wow.
But it's
Yeah.
also triggered by the accumulation of this chemical
Yeah.
in the liver.
Going off script for a second, I've heard, I don't know if this is a myth, but maybe you can shine some light on it, that if you vomit from drinking alcohol without trying to, or your body just kind of like does it for you, that's your body's last resort, and if it didn't do that, you would pass away.
I wouldn't necessarily say it's that radical, but it's definitely an adaptation, right? That is trying to get rid of a toxin, right? Or not rid, it's trying to get rid of the alcohol that is going to produce a toxin if you don't do that.
Yeah. Okay.
Right.
Interesting.
Yeah. So overall, how does alcohol disrupt sleep? It's a broad question, but
Well, alcohol actually acts as a sedative, right?
yeah.
So it basically puts you to sleep more easily.
Yeah.
But the issue is the quality of sleep is not good. It's very intermittent. You never really make it to REM sleep. It's kind of fragmented. So overall, even though somebody might be out for a while, they're not really getting the sleep that is healthy. They're getting what people really call kind of a very fragmented, kind of sporadic kind of sleep. And that's the issue. People tend to feel more tired, right?
Yeah.
After they wake up than certainly after a normal night of sleep.
Interesting. All right. So if you could leave CSB+SJU students with one piece of advice or piece of information about how binge drinking specifically really negatively impacts the brain and body, what would it be to hopefully influence them to make good choices and take care of their body?
Well, there's nothing positive about binge drinking. I mean, that's the reality of things. It's basically going to, as we address, create, issues that, are not good. Now, does that mean that alcohol consumption as a whole is always bad? No. I mean, it can, moderate alcohol consumption can be quite positive, like the name of your program, Stopped at Buzzed, right? There's really nothing wrong with Buzzed, but, it's just the abuse that's the problem. So I would encourage students to basically, find a way to use it in a moderate way, and do not abuse it, especially in situations like binge drinking, because again, there's nothing positive about it.
Yeah, that aligns perfectly with our message. Our slogan is, it's not an anti-alcohol campaign, it's a pro don't be an idiot campaign. And I think that sums it up well.
Yeah. So lastly, if you could give your college self any piece of advice, and it doesn't have to be alcohol related, what would that be?
I would just say be as open as possible. Try new things. Try things that you might not even be all that comfortable with at first glance. Try to see the world through others' eyes, and you will, I think, live a better life. You will live a more open life. That's, I think, what the role of a college education is all about.
Yes.
Yeah. Awesome. Well, thank you so much for speaking with us today. That was all super interesting information, and we're happy to have you here on the podcast. And thank you for watching.
Thank you.
Thank you.